Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Grant always prided himself on being a level-headed man. He wasn't the type to make a big deal out of nothing. He preferred to handle problems rationally, without unfounded suspicions or impulsive moves. But lately, something felt off. He could sense it. It wasn't a drastic change, just small things that built up like pieces of a troubling puzzle. Lorraine, his wife, had always been a busy woman with plenty of commitments, but now her absences felt different. Her tone of voice changed whenever he asked about her day. Short, generic answers, like she was rehearsing what to say. In the beginning, Grant ignored it. He thought it was just fatigue or work stress. But some things didn't add up. The messages she received and then immediately deleted. The quiet laughter when she looked at her phone. The way she started dressing up more for the office even though she always said she hated the cold, impersonal work environment. He tried to push away the paranoia, but the doubt took root. Then came the day that turned all his suspicions into something more. A mutual friend approached him with a hesitant look. "Grant. I'm not sure I should tell you this, but I figured it was better you hear it from me than from someone else." Grant felt a knot in his stomach. Whatever came next wasn't going to be good. "Last week, I was at a restaurant in town. I saw Lorraine there. She was with Wesley." Grant's heart skipped a beat. Wesley. One of her assistants at the office. A young man, always helpful, the type who seemed to be everywhere at once. Lorraine mentioned him casually sometimes, but always like it was nothing important. "Anne?" Grant asked, staying calm but feeling his throat go dry. His friend hesitated. "I wouldn't have said anything if it was just lunch, but they seemed too close." Laughing, exchanging looks. The way she touched his arm, it didn't look like a work meeting. Grant was silent for a few moments. It felt like a punch in the chest, but he refused to react without proof. It could be a misunderstanding. An exaggeration. It could be anything. But the unease didn't go away. That night, Lorraine came home late. She carried a scent of perfume that wasn't her usual one. Grant watched her every move as she dropped her bag on the couch and smiled at him like nothing had happened. "How was your day?" he asked, testing his own patience. "Tiring," she said, without giving many details, as she removed her earrings and headed to the bathroom. It was a lie. He knew it. But how to prove it? How to find out the truth without coming off as an insecure man who suspected things for no reason? That was when he made a difficult decision. He needed proof. The next day, quietly, he contacted a private investigator. Someone reliable, who could look into this without arousing suspicion. Grant felt he couldn't trust his instincts alone. He needed facts. And when those facts arrived, they were brutal. A few weeks later, the detective handed him a manila envelope. It was heavy, filled with truths Grant still didn't want to face. Sitting at his work desk, with trembling hands, he opened it and saw what he feared, pictures of Lorraine and Wesley together. At a cafe, at a restaurant. The way she smiled at him, the gleam in her eyes. But the final blow came in a photo that didn't leave room for doubt, the two of them, in a discreet parking lot, kissing. Grant felt his blood run cold. That was it. No more doubts. His wife was cheating on him. And the worst part? She did it with a chilling ease, like she felt no guilt at all. Like he was just a minor detail in her life. Grant closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. Whatever came next would change everything. But he already knew. He wouldn't just ignore this. Not this time. Grant spent the day processing the truth. Her smile, the touch on Wesley's arm, the hidden kiss in the parking lot. It was all right there, stuck in his mind like an open wound he couldn't overlook. That night, she got home like nothing had happened. She was carrying a bottle of wine, the same one they used to share on special occasions. When she smiled and said, "I thought we could relax a bit tonight." "You've been so tense lately," Grant felt a wave of bitter irony rise in his throat. Tense? She had no idea why. Or worse, she did and simply didn't care. He accepted the wine. Watched as she talked about work, about her day, all with the greatest ease in the world. She was a great actress. But Grant was about to bring that act down. When she finished talking, he calmly got up and picked up the envelope from the table. He held it for a moment, watching her reaction before opening it. "You know what's in here?" he asked, voice firm but controlled. Lorraine frowned but kept her composure. "What's that?" Grant opened the envelope and spread the photos out on the table. Pictures of Lorraine and Wesley, each one more revealing than the last. She looked at the photos for a moment, but to his surprise, she showed no shock, guilt, or regret. She just sighed and leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "So this is it? You hired someone to follow me?" Her voice had a mocking tone, like she was the victim here. Grant felt his blood boil, but he refused to be provoked. "I wanted the truth," he said, staring straight at her. Lorraine gave him a cold smile. "And what exactly do you plan to do with this truth, Grant? Yell at me? Throw a glass against the wall? Call me awful names? Or, leave me?" She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. "Do you want to end our marriage because of this?" Grant was stunned by her coldness. But what came next was even worse. "This is just a reflection of your fragile male ego. You want to destroy everything because I got involved with someone else? You think this never happened before? You think you're the only guy who's ever been cheated on?" Grant blinked, incredulous. "That's your justification?" Lorraine shrugged. "You need to get over this old-fashioned idea of fidelity. Marriage doesn't have to be a prison, Grant. We're adults. We can have moments with other people without it meaning the end of everything. But you," she smiled again, this time almost pitying him. "You're too sensitive to understand that. Too sensitive." Grant felt something snap inside him. For years, he prided himself on being understanding, on caring, on being the best husband he could be. But there, sitting in front of Lorraine, he realized none of that ever meant anything to her. She wasn't sorry. She didn't care about what she'd done. For her, cheating was just a trivial thing, something a secure man should just brush off. And at that moment, Grant knew, without a doubt, that there was nothing left to save. Grant felt Lorraine's words hang in the air like poison. Each syllable was a sharp blade, cutting through whatever was left of the marriage he once believed in. She looked at him with a mix of superiority and boredom, like he was some naive kid who didn't understand the real world. But Grant wasn't naive. And right then, he noticed something that changed everything. He realized Lorraine had never respected him. She never saw him as a true partner. To her, he was just a convenient accessory, a husband who played his part without complaint. He remembered all the times he tried to show his emotions, when he opened up, shared his fears and insecurities. And now, he understood how Lorraine saw all of that, weakness. She'd called him too sensitive, like it was an insult. But to Grant, that wasn't weakness. It was honesty. "Do you really believe all that?" he asked, his voice low but steady. Lorraine shrugged again. "I believe in what's practical. You're freaking out because I went after what I wanted. Men do that all the time, Grant. You think I don't know the stories? Your coworkers? Your own boss? They all cheat. But their wives don't make a scene about it. They get the dynamic." Grant let out a dry laugh. "Dynamic? So that's what our marriage is to you? A transaction? A convenient setup? Lorraine propped her elbows on the table and sighed, like she was explaining something obvious to someone who just couldn't grasp it. Grant, I like our life. We have stability, comfort. I like you. But I don't want to be suffocated by outdated rules. You think love means exclusivity? That's for insecure people. She smiled, like she'd just shut down his argument, like that was the end of the conversation. But Grant didn't smile back. He was still trying to absorb what he was hearing. Throughout the relationship, he'd done his best to be a supportive husband, someone Lorraine could rely on, someone who offered comfort and security. But now, looking at her, he saw the raw truth: Lorraine never wanted a real partner. She wanted an audience. Someone to admire her, to support her emotionally and financially, but who would never demand anything in return. A husband who understood his only job was to keep up appearances and pretend nothing was happening. You act like you're doing me a favor, Grant muttered. Lorraine narrowed her eyes, as if she was starting to lose patience. I'm trying to keep you from throwing away something that could still be good. But honestly? If you want to play the victim and act like a sulky teenager, then maybe we should just end this. She picked up one of the photos on the table and stared at it for a moment before tossing it aside like a scrap of paper. But think carefully. What do you really gain by leaving me? You'll end up alone, bitter, while I move on with my life. Is that who you want to be, Grant? Because I'm sure Wesley isn't suffering one bit. Hearing Wesley's name made something snap inside Grant. But it wasn't rage. It wasn't hate. It was clarity. For the first time since discovering the affair, he saw Lorraine exactly as she was. No illusions, no excuses. And in that moment, he made the most important decision of his life. Grant stayed quiet for a few moments. Lorraine's voice still echoed in his mind, but instead of anger or frustration, he felt a strange sense of calm. The clarity of his decision gave him unexpected strength. He didn't need to argue anymore or try to understand what was already obvious: Lorraine had never been a real partner to him. And now, he had no reason left to stay. He took a deep breath and, with a composure that surprised even himself, stood up. You're right, he said, gathering the papers on the table and placing them back in the envelope. Lorraine raised an eyebrow, suspicious. About what? Grant looked her straight in the eye. That there's nothing here anymore. Surprise flickered across Lorraine's face for a split second, but it quickly turned into a cynical smile. So that's it? You're just going to throw it all away over one little mistake? He laughed, this time with genuine relief in his voice. It wasn't a mistake, Lorraine. Forgetting to pay a bill is a mistake. Taking a wrong turn is a mistake. What you did was a choice. She crossed her arms, annoyed. Oh, please, Grant. You're blowing this way out of proportion. No, I'm finally seeing things clearly. And you know what? I should thank you. Lorraine frowned. Thank me? Grant nodded. Yeah. Because if you hadn't done this, I would have spent the rest of my life thinking I was in a real marriage, when in reality, I was alone the whole time. He grabbed his car keys from the table and walked toward the door. Lorraine stood up quickly. Wait. Where are you going? Grant opened the door, but before leaving, he turned to her one last time. Moving on. And then he was gone. In the following days, Lorraine tried to keep up appearances. She told mutual friends that Grant was overreacting, that he was being dramatic, that he'd probably come crawling back in a few days. But days turned into weeks. And weeks turned into months. The divorce process began quickly, with no big fights or lengthy arguments. Grant didn't want anything except his freedom. He didn't fight over assets or seek revenge. He just wanted out of that relationship so he could move on with his life. Lorraine, on the other hand, kept up her usual routines. She still went to fancy dinners, still acted like nothing had changed. But something was different. The attention she used to get wasn't the same. The admiration some friends once had for her turned into forced smiles. Over time, people realized something was wrong. And Wesley? He went on with his life. Without Lorraine. When the divorce was finalized, Lorraine found out in the worst way that Wesley never intended to stay with her. He was already involved with another woman, a new employee at the company, and he didn't even try to hide it. She tried to reach out to him, but her messages went unanswered. She tried to meet him in person, but Wesley avoided her. To him, Lorraine had just been a passing fling, exactly like she'd once described her affair to Grant. That was the moment Lorraine finally felt the weight of what she'd done. She didn't just lose her husband, she lost the respect of those around her. She didn't have Wesley, didn't have Grant, and worst of all, she no longer had that false sense of control she'd always cherished. Meanwhile, Grant felt something he hadn't experienced in years: peace. For the first time, he was free. Free from a one-sided relationship, free from manipulation, free from feeling like he had to be someone else just to be accepted. And, in the end, he realized that Lorraine had never been right about him. Because what she called his fragile male ego had never been fragility at all. It had been strength the whole time. Grant didn't expect his life to change so fast after the divorce. At first, he thought he'd feel empty, maybe even regretful. After all, he'd spent years with Lorraine. They shared a home, memories, good and bad times. But to his surprise, what he felt wasn't sadness. It was relief. The first few days were strange. He found himself listening to the silence in his new apartment, a smaller place but one that brought him a sense of peace he'd never known. There were no more tense undercurrents, no glances full of hidden motives, no cold, calculated conversations. For the first time, he could just exist without having to prove anything to anyone. The divorce was settled quickly. Lorraine signed the papers without much resistance, maybe assuming Grant would regret it later and come crawling back. But days turned into weeks, and he never looked back. Over time, people around him started to notice the change. The weight he'd carried from a suffocating marriage was gone. He seemed more alive, more present. At work, he started to stand out again. He took better care of himself, went back to hobbies he'd given up years ago, reconnected with old friends Lorraine had driven away with her subtle criticisms. And that's when Lorraine realized something she'd never considered. She always believed Grant depended on her emotionally. She thought he was weak, that he needed her approval to feel good about himself. But now, watching him move on without a hint of regret, something inside her began to twist. She tried reaching out discreetly. A casual message, like nothing had happened: "Hey. How are you?" Grant read it and smiled. A genuine smile, with no bitterness or resentment. He could have answered. Could have left a door open, asked how she was doing. But deep down, he knew Lorraine wasn't really worried about him. She wanted to test the waters. And Grant wasn't interested in playing that game anymore. He blocked her number and went on with his day. But Lorraine didn't give up so easily. A few weeks later, she, coincidentally, showed up at the restaurant where Grant usually had lunch. She looked flawless, as always. A smile on her face, eyes shining like nothing had ever happened. "What a coincidence," she said, pulling up a chair before he could react. Grant just looked at her without any real emotion. "Coincidence?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. She laughed, like it was all some funny misunderstanding. "Come on, Grant. We don't have to act like strangers. We spent years together." He took a deep breath and set his utensils down. "You're right. We did. But you know what the difference is now? I finally see you." Lorraine blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" Grant leaned forward a bit, keeping his gaze steady on hers. I mean, for a long time, I settled for less than I deserved. I was loyal, honest, vulnerable. But to you, that was never enough. You mistook my kindness for weakness. But I'm not weak, Lorraine. I never was. She opened her mouth to say something, but for the first time, she couldn't find any words. Grant stood, took out his wallet, and paid his bill. Before leaving, he looked at her one more time, with the calm of someone who was finally free. I hope you find what you're looking for. But it's not me. And with that, he walked out. Lorraine stayed there, alone, staring at the empty space in front of her. For the first time, there was no one to admire her, no one to fall for her lies. And then, she realized. She hadn't just lost a husband. She'd lost the only man who ever truly cared about her. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.